Hello and welcome back to the Asymmetric Power with Dr. V podcast. We launched a little bit late this week because I had a lot going on. I was traveling and there were other things going on in the world. But I will take advantage of the slight delay to include some of the information and analysis that has come in since yesterday. So let's talk about Trump and specifically Elon Musk's closure of USAID, the United States Agency for International Development. Let's review why. Because I brought up in the very first episode that development, the D of development, has been considered to be in some of the theorists of asymmetric warfare, of which I have been a practitioner, to be the added arm, right, to the levers of power, which can be dime fill, diplomatic, information, military, economic, financial, intelligence, and law enforcement. And if you add the second D for development, you change it to the acronym midfield. And many good arguments have been made that it is an element of what we call soft power, right? So soft power, like USAID, ensures that people who fight for democracy, like I have, or protect NGOs that are otherwise aggrieved and repressed by dictators, continue to report things like on corruption, continue to provide soup kitchens and protections and medical care for children or education for single mothers in communities where single mothers do not receive government help, right? So all of these good and amazing things have been funded through USAID and provide support on the ground and provide also access to the West, and from the United States perspective, provide that there's always something on the ground or someone on the ground who is still fighting for justice and democracy and equality. Fair enough. I myself have worked with USAID. My company, Asymmetrica, has been an implementing partner of USAID, so I want to be very clear on that. So I have direct experience. And let's clear out what's good and what's bad, and what this means and how we should head forward, because it has, from practitioners of national power and theorists of national power, it looks like one of the legs of the chair just got sawed off. So what is it? So USAID is under the arm of the U.S. State Department, right? And this also happens in the U.K., right? The Foreign Office also has the Foreign Commonwealth and Development Office. So the development arm a couple of years ago got folded into the Foreign Office to kind of mimic the structure that USAID, with them it's even more integrated. With the U.S., it's under State Department, but the budget for USAID is approved by the U.S. Congress every year, right? And they have to present every year the great things that they have done, what the impact is, and how what they're going to do next year is going to be even more amazing to justify their funding, right? So far, so good. That's fair enough. Then, having worked with USAID, I can tell you exactly how it works. You have the USAID has a budget approved that for a particular project, defense of democracy or the powers of democratic powers, so that they don't get snuffed out by a dictatorship. And then those projects are specifically designed and then overseen by what we call a beltway bandit. So a beltway bandit that's not a positive term, as you can imagine. And one of the big companies that get the contracts from USAID to ensure that the smaller implementing partners, like my own company and others, meet the standards for integrity. So they cannot directly finance any member of a foreign government. or anybody who is politically exposed. They can only fund, specific implementing partners that are not politically aligned, and that and by them, help them with things like the employees or the technology if you need computers. And you have to report every month exactly how you spent your budget. You have to present a budget of what you need, who's going to be paid, and how much. And then that needs to be approved every month by this other company that is hired by USAID, and then they report it, and then those reports then eventually go back to the U.S. Congress. Now, one of the things that is controversial is that when you are overseeing working with these projects, the person overseeing you gets 30% of that money. So automatically, these companies, and there's several of them, there's Chemonics is one of them, but there are many, many others, is that they get 30%. They bid for the contract to oversee a particular project, say Defense of Democracy in Venezuela, or in women's equality in South Africa, or whatever, right? Something like that. And then within that, they work with people who are on the ground, like I was, and then they get 30% of that just to oversee what you're doing. Possibly they get more than that. So there is a criticism within the Global South, which has been brought up by a very good and dear friend of mine, and development economist Emily Brearley, and that the complaint has always been that a lot of that doesn't see the people on the ground, that the people who most need the help don't actually see that. So it is on the basis of that criticism that Elon Musk has gone ahead and taken basically a saw to USAID. Now, the way he did it is very controversial, because it means that what he did was Trump's chief of staff, Dan Katz, wrote to USAID and said, we want to go in there and have access to the master keys, shall we say, of the Treasury Department, supposedly just to do an efficiency assessment of payments. However, what they were asking for, and in the middle of this is a 25-year-old very closely associated with Elon Musk, was to have access also to Social Security payments, tax returns, and also the ability to stop payments of the federal government to anything that the White House does not agree with, right? So this is controversial because the national payments are equivalent to $3 trillion. And he was refused that ability. And so Musk tweeted that USAID is a criminal organization, failing to mention the fact that he himself is taking money from USAID, and that SpaceX is a massive government contractor, right? With NASA and others. So what happens next? Well, it basically means that the U.S. Has lost a lot of leverage over working with local NGOs. It means that sacks of rice and food to hungry people in war zones, or Sudan, or Ukraine, don't receive those bags that are labeled, USAID. It means that a lot of opposition movements, like I used to be involved with, no longer receive that funding, and or in other countries, not just basically all around the world. And then, if even the question is, is this too strong a medicine? Is this too strong? Were there problems with the implementation of USAID programs? Yes, for sure. Were the people who were operating on the ground, like I once upon a time did, not receiving the resources that they needed? And even more importantly, are people in the Global South who are starving or have children that need protecting and need education. Did they have criticisms? Absolutely. But is eliminating USAID wholeheartedly really the answer? And I would argue that it is not, because you need um, some way to help the local communities and to gain goodwill. Perhaps it is not through USAID. Maybe it's through something else. But then it needs to be something where State Department, for instance, gets more involved in funding things that people really care about, to give them finance and opportunities and not aid. Maybe it's funding major ports the way other countries like China do, right? So the way China gets partners on board is through development aid, but through development aid that is not of the USAID flavor, but is more of the flavor of the Belt and Road Initiative, which is establish ports, establish highways, establish airports, which of course benefit China in increasing its trade, but also employs some locals and helps the local politicians gain some benefit, gain some goodwill. So those are two very different ways of doing development from the US to China. And the way the sudden elimination of USAID, while there's good reason to criticize certain of the projects of USAID, eliminating it and furloughing all these people who have dedicated their lives to these projects is not really the right way forward. We still need to hear that there is a plan for uh, for aiding the development in the countries where, in this case, the United States wants to exercise national power. So that's one way to think about this USAID story. Does it help or does it harm the U.S. ability to exert and project power and build relationships in ways that are not military? So this is a controversial topic, and I have presented a complicated and nuanced view. So I hope that you will respond in the comments below. Thank you very much, and see you next time. Hasta la próxima in Asymmetric Power with Dr. V.